Hello Zenith women and welcome to the channel. Maturity isn't when you stop caring, it's when you stop reacting. And that's exactly what shook them to their core. They weren't ready for a woman who could smile in the face of disrespect, close the door without slamming it, and walk away without leaving footprints. While they were busy scripting chaos, you were rewriting the rules, not with rage, not with revenge, but with unbothered precision. Here's the cold, hard fact. Most people don't fear being blocked. They fear being forgotten. And you? You didn't just forget them. You outgrew them so gracefully, they're still trying to figure out if it was divine intervention or emotional judo. Let's be honest. Some folks are so used to drama, they treat peace like a threat. And when you handled them like a seasoned therapist on a lunch break, oh, they freaked out. Not because you exploded, but because you didn't. Now buckle up, because we're about to dive into 11 brutally real reasons why your calm shook their soul louder than any confrontation ever could. And by the end of this, they'll wish they never underestimated the Sigma female. Number one, you became a trigger for their conscience. Every time they see you now, laughing, glowing, evolving, they feel it. That tight, uneasy feeling in their chest they can't quite name. It's not just regret, it's exposure. You've become a walking reminder of the choices they made, the ego they couldn't tame, and the woman they never truly understood. You didn't throw their past in their face. You didn't need to. Your growth is the loudest testimony, and it speaks volumes without saying a single word. They thought walking away from you meant freedom, but all it really did was show them what it feels like to lose someone who genuinely had their back. Now, they scroll through your updates, pretending not to care, but deep down it's eating at them. Every post, every achievement, every calm smile you wear like armor, it all screams, you could have handled me better. What scares them most is that you've moved on without bitterness. You didn't stalk their stories, subtweet your pain, or orchestrate some public display of revenge. That kind of maturity is terrifying to someone who thrives on emotional reactions. You see, they expected to haunt you. Instead, they're haunted by you, because your peace is louder than their drama ever was. They know they lost access to something rare. Not just a relationship, not just your presence. They lost the safety of someone who understood them deeper than anyone else, but refused to stay small just to keep them comfortable. You became a mirror they didn't ask for, a reflection of who they could be if only they had the discipline, the emotional intelligence, and the guts to grow. Now, when they see you, they don't just see you, they see everything they're not. They see emotional control, quiet confidence, self-respect, and unshakable boundaries. That's what eats them alive. Because it means the problem was never you, it was always them. You didn't ruin them, you revealed them. And you didn't even have to try. That's what makes you unforgettable, and that's why they're still freaking out. Number two, you handled disrespect like a CEO handles complaints, without emotion. They came at you expecting chaos. Maybe a meltdown, maybe tears, maybe some kind of emotional outburst they could use against you later. But what they got instead, a calm, calculated response that felt more like a boardroom decision than a personal reaction. You didn't shout, you didn't plead, you just acted. You saw the disrespect, logged it, processed it, and without flinching, you made your move, just like a CEO reading a report full of red flags. No panic, no drama, just clear, direct action. You didn't argue your worth. You didn't beg for decency. You closed the file and walked out of the meeting. Because for you, respect is not a negotiation, it's a standard. And when someone crosses the line, you don't need to scream to prove a point. You remove access. No threats, no theatrics, just one subtle shift in your energy, and suddenly they're standing outside a door they didn't even realize had closed behind them. That's what shook them. Because most people are used to emotional messiness. They're used to dragging things out, looping conversations, giving second chances just to avoid loneliness. But you move like someone who knows what she brings to the table and refuses to sit where she's not respected. They didn't get to watch you spiral. They had to sit with the silence. And that silence said everything. This is the cost of crossing me. You didn't take it personal. You took it professional. And nothing is more terrifying to someone who tried to rattle you than realizing their disrespect couldn't even shake your posture. You didn't just leave with grace, you left with data. You remembered what was said, how it made you feel, and exactly what it revealed. And just like a CEO handling a breach of trust, you didn't retaliate. You simply cut ties and moved forward with precision. That level of control, that's power. And power, when it's quiet, mature, and unapologetic, is what makes people lose sleep. Number 3, you didn't demand loyalty. You tested integrity. You didn't beg for loyalty because you knew better. You understand something most people don't. Real loyalty isn't loud, it's proven. So instead of making dramatic speeches about trust or setting traps to catch betrayal, you simply stepped back and watched. You stayed silent, knowing full well what was going on, not out of weakness, but out of strategy. You gave them space, not because you were unsure, but because you were certain. Certain that people reveal themselves when they think you're not looking. And they did. Every small inconsistency, every delayed reply, every half-truth wrapped in fake charm, you saw it all. And yet you said nothing. You didn't confront them because you didn't need to. You let the truth unravel on its own. That's what shook them. You weren't reactive. You didn't go through their phone, demand explanations, or fall apart. You just watched. And they exposed themselves piece by piece. Your restraint was the trap. Your silence was the test. And they failed. Because people who lack integrity can't fake it for long. They start slipping. They get too comfortable. And when someone is used to manipulating people into emotional responses, your calm made them feel unsafe. They didn't know where they stood with you, and that made them nervous. But what really terrified them, the moment they realized you already knew. That level of emotional intelligence is rare. It's threatening because you made it clear you're not someone who needs to control others. You simply let people be who they are, and you decide from there. You don't argue with behavior, you analyze it. And when someone fails your unspoken test, you don't explain the consequences. You just execute them. You didn't ask for loyalty. You handed them the stage and watched what they did with it. And they fumbled because they thought your silence meant softness. They didn't realize it was you giving them just enough rope to hang their own mask. You saw everything. You said nothing. And that kind of power, that's terrifying. Number 4, you didn't humble them. Life did after losing you. You didn't have to lift a finger, no revenge, no dramatic comeback, no need to show them what they lost. You just walked away, quietly, completely. And at first they didn't feel it. They thought they won. They thought they had the upper hand. But life had different plans. Because when someone loses a woman who brought peace, structure, and emotional maturity into their world, it doesn't hit all at once. It hits in stages. It starts slow. Missed texts they used to ignore. Silence where there used to be comfort. Little reminders of how calm life felt when you were around. And then it grows. The chaos they used to think was normal suddenly starts caving in on them. You weren't the punishment. Life was. And life doesn't forget. It mirrors energy. The same emotional games, the same selfishness, the same disrespect they threw at you. It came back. Harder from others, from situations, from the universe itself. Because when someone mistreats a woman who genuinely had their back, the void she leaves is massive. It's not just about missing you, it's about realizing they were only ever functioning properly because of you. You didn't humble them. Life stripped them down, slowly, painfully. And the more their world unraveled, the more they began to remember just how much you held things together. You were the safe place, the steady voice, the one person who didn't try to break them or compete with them, but supported them in silence without needing applause. That absence, it's loud now, deafening. And no matter how much they try to fill it, nothing feels quite right. Because peace like yours isn't easily replaced. It was custom. It was real. And they traded it for momentary control, ego trips, and drama they weren't even built to handle. Now they sit in the middle of the storm they created, wishing they had the maturity to match yours. But it's too late. You're gone. Not just physically, but spiritually, emotionally, and energetically. And that's what humbled them, not your rage, not your words, just your absence, doing what no punishment ever could. Number 5, you replaced your need for justice with an obsession for growth. They wanted a reaction, maybe a little chaos, maybe for you to get stuck in the loop of trying to make things fair. But you didn't take the bait. You didn't chase apologies. You didn't beg for accountability. Instead, you turned your pain into fuel, your silence into strategy, and your heartbreak into a higher version of yourself. You stopped wasting your energy trying to teach people how to treat you. You realized the most powerful way to respond wasn't through revenge, it was through elevation. While they were out there expecting you to spiral, you were reading, healing, building, reflecting, stacking your wins and sharpening your vision. They were watching to see you crack, but instead they watched you glow up in silence. That scared them, because they thought they had the power to break you. Instead, they triggered your next evolution. And when you stop needing justice from people who refuse to be accountable, you become untouchable. You become dangerous in the best way. You stop playing small. You stop watering dead plants. You stop trying to explain your worth to people who only understand control, not connection. And the more you focused on growth, the more distant you became, not just in miles, but in mindset. They couldn't relate to you anymore. Your energy shifted. Your standards elevated. Your presence became sharper, more grounded, and almost intimidating. The things they used to do to get a reaction, now they barely register on your radar. They still check on you whether you know it or not. And what they see scares them because you're unrecognizable in the most beautiful, terrifying way. You've leveled up so far that reaching your new vibration would require effort they're not capable of. That kind of growth doesn't just hurt their ego, it exposes their stagnancy. You didn't get even, you got better, and in doing so, you left them behind, exactly where they belong. Still hoping you'll come back to that old version of yourself. But she doesn't live here anymore. She outgrew the need for revenge and found something far more satisfying, evolution. Number 6, you made emotional maturity look like a superpower. They thought you didn't feel anything, that your calm meant coldness, that your silence was you shutting down. But what they didn't realize until it was too late was that your emotional control wasn't detachment, it was discipline. While they were expecting messy arguments, crying spells, or emotional chaos, you were busy doing something far rarer, protecting your peace like it was your life's work. You didn't lash out, you didn't chase closure, you didn't explain your every emotion just to be validated. You just handled it, quietly, internally, like someone who refuses to give their power away. And that shook them, because they were used to people crumbling when things got heavy. They weren't prepared for someone who could carry pain with poise and still make clear-headed decisions without turning the situation into a circus. You didn't need to be understood. That's what made you dangerous. You could sit in a storm completely unseen and still walk out stronger. You didn't fight to prove you were right. You didn't spiral when you were misunderstood. You understood yourself. That alone put you in a league most people can't reach. What they saw as too much pride was actually self-respect. What they called too quiet was strategic distance. And that moment they realized you weren't shutting down, but simply rising above. That's when it hit them. You weren't heartless, you were just highly aware of who deserved access to your emotions and who didn't. Most people want power over others. You wanted power over yourself. That's what made you rare. That's what made you intimidating. You were never out of control. You were always just 5 steps ahead. And instead of trying to manipulate outcomes or fix broken people, you chose to master your own reality. That's emotional maturity. That's the superpower. And it scared them, because you didn't need to scream to be heard. You didn't need drama to feel seen. You just stayed grounded, walked away when it was time, and built a life so aligned that their absence didn't even echo. Number 7, you moved like you were chosen, not chasing. You never chased. That was never your style. You walked into every room like you were already supposed to be there. No need to prove, no need to perform, and people felt that. It wasn't arrogance, it was alignment. You moved like someone who knew their worth before anyone had the chance to question it. They didn't realize it at first, but they were orbiting you the entire time, caught up in your energy, feeding off your calm, trying to keep pace with a presence that didn't even try to command attention. It just had it. You weren't loud, you weren't flashy, but everything about you felt intentional, like your soul had GPS and you weren't wasting time on detours. You didn't cling to anyone because you were already full. You didn't need people to complete you. You let them witness you. And that level of self-possession is rare. It draws people in without effort and confuses them when you don't beg them to stay. You gave them space to show up right. And when they didn't, you didn't fight. You withdrew. Quietly, completely. Like a portal closing behind you. That's when the panic hit. Because your exit wasn't just the loss of a relationship, it was the loss of access. You weren't just a person in their life, you were a dimension. one where peace was normal, where being seen without having to perform was possible, where the energy felt safe. And when you left, it all collapsed. You didn't have to explain your departure. Your absence did the speaking. It echoed in their empty conversations, their restless nights, their shallow connections. Because once someone's felt your presence, the calm, the depth, the realness, everything else feels two-dimensional. And now they're stuck trying to replicate a frequency they didn't appreciate when it was standing right in front of them. You moved like you were chosen, not because you thought you were better, but because you knew you weren't meant to beg. And once you left their orbit, they realized they weren't losing a partner. They were losing gravity. Number 8, you let their games expire without touching the board. They came with their little tricks, mind games, hot and cold routines, delayed replies meant to test your patience, subtle digs dressed as jokes, all of it designed to get you emotionally hooked, to pull you into some silent war of attention and control. But you never played, not once. You saw the setup, and instead of reacting, you simply stepped back like someone who's not here to win a battle, but to leave the battlefield entirely. While they were waiting for you to crack, to compete, to crawl into their chaos, you gave them silence. Not the kind of silence that hopes for a reaction, but the kind that communicates, "This isn't worth my energy." And that silence hit harder than any comeback, because when someone's trying to orchestrate drama and you refuse to give them a stage, they start to feel like an actor performing to empty seats. They wanted attention. You gave them indifference. They wanted to confuse you. You responded with clarity. They hoped you'd chase validation, but instead, you validated yourself and moved like a woman who doesn't lose sleep over someone else's ego trip. And that broke the entire game, because manipulation only works on people who need something. You didn't, not their validation, not their approval, not their bait. You weren't trying to prove you were better. You were just busy being too grounded to stoop low. While they thrived on chaos, you had mastered calm. And nothing messes with a manipulator more than someone who refuses to react. You didn't argue. You didn't clap back. You didn't make a scene. You just let the game die from lack of participation. You exposed the emptiness of it without even pointing it out. You didn't need to be loud to be powerful. You just needed to be unmoved. And when they finally looked around, realizing their strategies had collapsed, their control had slipped, and the audience had left, they felt it, the unsettling quiet, the absence of someone who refused to be a pawn. That's when it hit them. You weren't avoiding the game, you were above the whole board. Number 9, you didn't cut them off, you elevated so they couldn't reach you. You didn't just slam the door or yell goodbye like some dramatic exit. No, you moved in a way that was quieter, cleaner, and far more effective. Instead of severing ties with a bang, you raised your own level, so high and so clear that they couldn't just stroll back into your life whenever they felt like it. It wasn't about cutting off, it was about upgrading. They weren't blocked out because you wanted to punish them. They were simply no longer equipped to operate on the frequency you'd grown into. Imagine someone trying to step onto an escalator that's moving faster than they can keep up with. If they don't match your pace, they fall behind, and eventually they lose sight of where you're headed. You didn't chase them away, you just started walking a path they couldn't follow. That shift in energy is something people underestimate. When you evolve, your boundaries don't need to be loud or rigid, they just become natural. You don't have to scream "stay out" because the atmosphere around you changes. Your presence itself becomes a filter. Only those who bring the right energy, mindset, and respect can cross that invisible threshold. They thought losing you meant you disappeared, but really you became untouchable, not by burning bridges or holding grudges, but by creating a space so elevated that it requires real effort, respect, and growth just to be invited back. You didn't close doors. You built a skywalk, high above the noise, far away from the drama, and only accessible to those who can match your height. That's maturity, that's power. It's not about destruction, it's about construction. It's the difference between throwing away a bridge and building a better one. They weren't cut off, they were disqualified. And the only way back is through their own growth. You showed them that sometimes the greatest exit isn't a slam, but an elevation. Number 10, you didn't fight for closure, you became it. They expected you to come back with fiery arguments, tearful explanations, or desperate pleas for understanding. They thought closure meant dragging out every hurt, dissecting every moment, trying to get the last word in some messy, exhausting battle. But you didn't fall into that trap. You didn't give them what they wanted, not because you were indifferent, but because you understood something deeper. You realized that true closure isn't found in fights or words, it's found in peace. You became the calm that settles storms, the quiet strength that doesn't need validation. Instead of chasing closure, you embodied it. Your silence wasn't empty, it was full of resolve, wisdom, and unshakable finality. That silence spoke louder than any argument ever could. It echoed in the spaces they left behind, in the nights they spent replaying what they lost. You didn't argue about the past or demand answers about the future. You simply became the ending they couldn't rewrite. The moment they realized you were no longer available to be dragged into their drama was the moment the story truly ended. You were the final chapter. Not just because you walked away, but because you walked away whole. You didn't need their permission to heal. You didn't need their approval to move on. You created your own peace and made it undeniable, and that unsettled them. Because closure is a power move. It's not about revenge or proving a point. It's about taking control of your own narrative so completely that no one else can pick up the pen. They were left hanging. Not because you left questions unanswered, but because you answered them with your presence, or rather your absence. You didn't fight for closure, you became it. And that's a truth harder to face than any argument. Number 11, you made accountability look sexy. When things went sideways, and they always do, you didn't run for cover or play the blame game. Instead, you stood tall and owned your piece of the puzzle with a kind of fierce grace that left people speechless. You didn't waste time twisting your feelings into knots or making excuses. You simply accepted responsibility like it was your natural state, no drama attached. That's what made you magnetic, not because you were perfect, but because you were real. You showed that accountability isn't some heavy burden, it's a power move. You made owning your flaws and mistakes look not only necessary, but downright sexy. It sent a message loud and clear: you don't need anyone's approval to feel complete. Your self-worth isn't negotiable. People around you realized quickly that you weren't fragile, you were formidable. You didn't need to defend yourself endlessly or beg for forgiveness. Your honesty and integrity spoke volumes, cutting through all the noise and nonsense that often surrounds conflict. It was like watching someone walk through fire unscathed, and it made others question their own weak attempts to dodge responsibility. By handling accountability without overthinking or emotional theatrics, you rewrote the rules. You proved that true maturity isn't about perfection, it's about ownership. And that ownership? It's magnetic. It draws in respect, not pity. It commands attention, not sympathy. You shattered the outdated idea that people need constant validation to feel whole. You demonstrated that the real strength lies in knowing who you are, owning every part of your story, and standing unshaken no matter what. And that level of inner power, it's not just attractive, it's unforgettable. In the end, handling a Sigma female with maturity isn't about grand gestures or dramatic confrontations. It's about embodying a power so quiet, so unwavering, that it dismantles chaos without lifting a finger. It's the kind of strength that doesn't demand attention but commands respect, not through noise but through presence. You didn't need to fight, prove, or chase because your calm, your boundaries, and your integrity spoke louder than any argument ever could. This kind of emotional mastery leaves an indelible mark, a lesson they didn't ask for but desperately needed. They may have expected storms and fireworks, but you gave them something far more unsettling: unshakable silence, deliberate distance, and a peace that echoed louder than their noise. That's not just maturity, that's a rare kind of power that unsettles the unprepared and elevates the unbreakable. So next time you find yourself facing the chaos of a Sigma female, remember this. It's not about breaking her down, but about standing so firmly in your own truth that she has no choice but to recognize the force she can't touch. And when you master that, you don't just survive the encounter. You transform it into a quiet victory that lingers long after words have faded. That is the art of handling the unhandleable. And it's a power few ever truly understand until they face it themselves. If you found this insight as powerful and refreshing as it was meant to be, don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss content that challenges the ordinary and celebrates the extraordinary. Like this video if it spoke to you. Drop a comment below to share your thoughts or experiences. Your voice matters here. And if you know someone who needs to hear this truth, go ahead and share it with them. Together, we're building a space where real strength, maturity, and authenticity are not just admired, they're mastered. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.